askreddit, what was a great thing ruined by popularity? eBay. I remember being able to get an absolute bargain for almost anything I wanted. Now, every shop puts their shit on eBay. The other problem with eBay is it completely messed up people's perceptions of what stuff is worth. Someone will see some shitty thing on eBay listed for like $500 and be like, oh, that's what it's worth, but it's been listed for $500 for 2 years and nobody bought it cause that's crazy. Then someone at a flea market or Craigslist is like, oh, it's on eBay for $500, so I'll give you a deal, $450. Bothies. Basically they're small cottages in remote parts of the Scottish Highlands that are left unlocked, free to be used for shelter by people traveling the mountains. They're not well furnished or anything, but they act as a freely usable weatherproof shelter for anyone to use in a country where summer usually just means the rain is slightly less frigid. It used to be that they weren't too well known. The hill walking community used them, maintained them, and everyone observed an unwritten code of conduct where you'd make sure to leave it tidy, clean and ready for the next person to use. However, they suddenly experienced an upsurge in awareness, and a lot of them suffered for it. People would go to them so they could have a piss up in a scenic location and leave them covered in rubbish and shit. Literal shit. They're normally refurbished from long abandoned houses and frequently don't have toilets, so they're equipped with a shovel to bury your waste. People seemed to think they were free holiday homes that they could just take over. Some people just vandalized them for the fun of it. As a result, they suffered quite a bit. They should offer shelter from bad weather and a safe place to sleep, but now you have a bunch of entitled, lazy assholes who go and wreck them. To some extent, amusement theme parks. They have to be popular to justify building new, state-of-the-art attractions, but eventually get so crowded that you need to buy special passes and get on a ride in less than 2 hours and can barely even find a place to sit when you want to rest for a minute. I live near Six Flags Great America, outside of Chicago. Anytime I've gone in the last 10 years it's been a ridiculous mass of humanity. More rides than ever, but every decent ride is like a 2-hour wait. As a resident of Orlando, this crowded issue is more than just in the parks. Universal has plans to make this Nintendo theme park or resort that is massive, and the neighborhood right across has justified issue with it concerning the amount of traffic that will come. This city is a tourist trap and our infrastructure is barely hanging on with the growth and visitors. Any restaurant Anthony Bourdain featured in his shows, even he acknowledged this. These fantastic gems would subsequently be overrun with diners that they suffered from overcrowding and lower standards. He did an episode of No Reservations once in Rome and didn't show any of the restaurants from the outside. If no one knows where the restaurants are, they won't be overcrowded with tourists and become inaccessible to the locals. Really respectable of him. Last year I did the Utah National and State Parks during the early spring off-season, and the measures they are taking to try to accommodate the massive number of visitors during the summer is incredible. Parking, lodging, sanitation, and safety are all becoming problems, and I hope that these places don't become victims of their own popularity. Arches really seems to attract people doing stupid, dangerous shit. The iconic Delicate Arch is like a magnet for morons who don't prepare for the trail, take risky selfies, vandalize and climb on things, and drink in places where there's 360 degrees of cliffs around you. Stupid and dangerous is a pretty low bar in many of those areas. We went to Arches on a family vacation back in '89 or '90. Dad planned us a long hike. Something like 14 miles. Dad, Mom, my brother, 10, and I, 7. We had a lot of fun. Lots of cliffs, several places where we, the kids, had to jump across crevices that were probably 20 feet deep, and sections along the ridge of large formations with a probably death level of fall on either side. I didn't find out until I was about 25 and we were talking about that trip that we were way out of our depth and that Dad was legitimately worried that this was going to become a capital P problem somewhere along the way. My mom still gets mad at him about it from time to time because it was stupid and dangerous and put us at risk. His mistake? Underestimating the amount of water we should take for that hike, and not appreciating the difference between 10 miles in the Smoky Mountains and 10 miles in the Utah desert. Side note, it's a testament to my parents' ability to keep their shit together under stress that we kids never knew that anything was wrong. They kept moving forward because anything else wasn't going to be helpful, and getting us scared would have been extremely counterproductive. Now it's a family lesson in both not making stupid decisions and in dealing with problems constructively. Over here in New England we have Mount Washington and the Presidential Range, which has a real deserved reputation for killing. Here's me, explaining to my 13-year-old brother why he needs to pack food, water, and winterized clothing to hike in July from Gorham at the base of the range, to up above the tree line. And if his pack is too heavy, to leave the Game Boy behind. Okay, I'm going to mix it up. Silphium, the plant used as a form of, likely very effective, birth control in the ancient Mediterranean. For this reason, and because it was apparently delicious, it gained popularity as a spice, aphrodisiac, and general cure-all and became worth its weight in gold. Julius Caesar stockpiled the stuff, and it is one of the most plausible origins of the heart symbol, and the association of that symbol with romance and doing the sex to people. Unfortunately, it only grew wild in and around Cyrene, and over-harvesting by the Romans after their takeover of the city drove Silphium into extinction by the time of Nero. And that's why we had to wait 2,000 years for the pill. Most of the historic monuments. The amount of markings all over them makes me sick. There is graffiti left by Roman soldiers and Napoleonic soldiers in Egypt, which was pretty neat to see tbh. Given enough time, graffiti becomes a part of the historical landmark itself. It's a catch-22 caused by an attachment to our own time. We see the landmark as something that needs to be preserved by, for, us, but the reality is we're in just as inconsequential a time of history as any. One of the most famous sites in the Hagia Sophia is where a Viking scratched his name in the marble. The scratch is protected and now treated as sacred, but it's functionally no different than you or I going to a structure built 200-400 years ago and's doing the same. Don't get me wrong. I don't like it when people deface historical landmarks. But our outrage is fleeting, and sometimes contributes to the perceived value of the relic. The function of graffiti isn't what's remarkable, it's the rarity. Those names written on the wall are probably the only surviving relics of their kind, representing historical forces clashing. It's the difference between a bullet hole from World War II and a bullet hole in my shed. It won't become more significant with time, because the world is full of our trash. Enough that 99% of what we make and do won't be interesting to future generations, no matter how much time passes. Beaches. Once tourism starts, it usually has devastating effects on the flora and fauna. They had to close a beach off from the public in Thailand to give nature time to recover. Edit for grammar. Edit to give more information. I was talking about Maya Bay, which was made famous by the movie The Beach, yes, the one with Leo. Despite its isolation, the bay attracts so many tourists there isn't even any room to lay down on the sand. The bay is closed off until officials believe the coral has rejuvenated sufficiently. They had a similar problem with the Poppy Reservation a year or so ago. There was a super bloom that resulted in fields of beautiful orange flowers. People kept visiting and taking pictures in the poppies. The problem was that these flowers were rather delicate. If you stepped on a patch too many times, there was a good chance the plants in that patch would die. They had designated paths all along reservation and signs telling people to stay on the path, but they kept ignoring them. There were a ton of dead patches in the poppy fields. There were also a ton of Instagram photos of people laying in patches of poppies. Same thing happening in the tulip fields in the Netherlands. Despite signs telling people to stick to the path, whole groups of people are just laying between the flowers/trampling them to get the perfect picture of themselves surrounded by a sea of tulips. It's very frustrating to witness how some people just really do not care at all how they leave the place, as long as they were able to take advantage of the beauty themselves. Airbnb. The idea of renting free room or sofa isn't bad at all. It turned into hard business, when companies owning dozens of apartments rent them to tourists. Meanwhile there is an apartment price and rent crisis. I guess living here isn't going to be affordable for middle class anymore. It's difficult as an Airbnb host with a room in the house available. We get a lot of middle-aged couples turning up expecting the whole place, and also expecting the house to be something else. They just don't read the info. It's really frustrating because we're upfront about what to expect, and have a really lovely room set up, but many people's experience of Airbnb is staying in commercial flats which has full-time maid service, so they come here expecting to get that, despite being £30 a night. Womp womp. I've stayed in both room in people's houses and whole place to yourself Airbnbs, and I can't imagine not checking this detail. Also, every time I've stayed with people it's been lovely, so don't let the bastards grind you down. Keep up the good work. I know, right? It's literally a search option. And thank you. We do work really hard to make it a lovely experience for people. I've had so many great experiences staying in people's houses for Airbnb traveling abroad. It's just the few. Like a lady who recently walked through the door, and said to my partner, "What are you? Some kind of student?" And then accused him of smoking drugs when she saw we were burning incense. Lol. Ah well, can't please them all.